There's a moment just before panic when your body knows something your mind refuses to accept. It starts small. Maybe you first notice it in a tight elevator, or maybe a locked bathroom door. Perhaps it's a crowded train where the air feels used up. You just keep telling yourself, you're fine. I'm fine. Everything's going to be okay. Until it's not. Tom never used to be afraid of small spaces, but not until the crawl space. It was supposed to be simple. The realtor said to Tom, "Look, just take a quick look. People like to see the foundation." Because the house was old. Quiet in that way abandoned places are quiet. Like they're holding something back. The crawlspace door was in a dank, dark part of the basement. The walls were cinder block, and the crawlspace door was raised halfway up the floor, and Tom had to crawl up into it to get into that crawlspace. There wasn't enough room to stand in the space. In order to check things out, Tom would have to crawl, and the floor of the crawlspace was pure dirt. The walls were looking moist and dank and almost molded, and he could even see vines growing out from the foundation. There was a single light bulb that hung close to the entrance of the crawlspace, but Tom could see further into the crawlspace and saw winding paths that were dark. He would have to crawl into the belly of this house with a flashlight to check things out as the realtor requested. Tom thought the tunnels looked awfully narrow. "Well, how far does it go back?" he asked the realtor. The realtor just laughed. "Oh, not far. Just enough for you to check things out." The words "just enough" reverberated in his own thoughts. He actually found himself mouthing those words, almost as if to reassure himself that it was okay to go into this narrow crawl space. Tom pulled himself up into the space. He got on his hands and knees, and immediately the air hit him. It was stale and damp and still, almost as if it hadn't moved in years. He crawled slightly into the space and turned around to look at the door frame, just to assure himself that the door was in fact still there and open, and that the realtor hadn't left. He crawled in further, and above him he could see wooden beams and pipes and concrete and wires, and beneath him he could feel dirt and stones between his fingers. As he advanced further into the crawl space, every breath he took felt louder than it should. "How do things look in there?" the realtor called to Tom. Her voice sounded so far away. He turned his head to answer, and that's when he realized he couldn't fully turn around. By this time, he was back far within one of the side tunnels under the crawl space, and he didn't realize how narrow it was because it was so dark. He didn't have a chance to turn on his flashlight, and now he did. Realizing that it was hard to turn around, he kept moving forward. He was wondering, why am I moving forward? He was in a bit of a panic because turning around suddenly felt complicated. He wasn't sure if he was actually mouthing the words or just thinking these words, but he kept telling himself, "This is just my nerves. It's just the darkness, and it's just the tightness." Oh, but then his flashlight started to flicker on and off. Just at first once, then twice, and then it came back on again. But he noticed something had changed. Despite the light, the darkness felt closer to him, as if the darkness noticed him. Then he heard something in the far distance. "Everything okay?" the realtor called again. But her voice was so muffled now, like it had pushed through layers to reach him. I'm fine," he said. But he wasn't fine. He tried to move backward just a little, just to test if he could turn around. But he couldn't move. Not really. Now he had something caught. Maybe it was his jacket or the beam above him pressing tighter than before. He inhaled a big breath, and the air felt thin. And this is when he started to realize there wasn't enough room. He pushed harder to try and turn around, but he couldn't. He started panicking. Can you pull me out?" he called. But this time, he heard no answer. "Hello?" He turned around as much as he could, and the square of light that was the entrance to the crawl space, it looked so small. That's impossible, he thought. It hadn't moved. I I hadn't moved. So why does it seem so small? And the walls, they felt closer, not moving, but just closer. He tried to inhale deeply, but his chest wouldn't expand all that way. Something was pressing down on him from above and from the sides and from everywhere. Panic doesn't necessarily always arrive all at once. It slowly builds, layer by layer and breath by breath. He tried to shove backward again, this time even harder. And pain shot through his shoulders because he realized he was stuck. "No, no, no!" He tried to calm himself. He tried to think logically. He kept telling himself, "You're not stuck. You can get out. You just need to..." The flashlight went out, and then the darkness seemed to swallow everything. For 1 second, then 2, and then 3. And then when the flashlight came back on, he looked back, and the opening was even smaller. It was smaller than before. He froze completely, because that meant he realized it sounded insane, but he realized the space was actually shrinking. He started breathing faster, maybe too fast. He felt as if the air felt used up, almost recycled, like every inhale gave him less than the last. "Help!" he shouted. But his voice just seemed to echo off of the dank, dark ceiling above him. And he heard no answer, no footsteps, no movement from the crawlspace entrance or even above him. It was just him and that space. He frantically clawed at the dirt, trying to pull himself forward, not backward, because he couldn't turn around. He just thought perhaps there's an exit forward, and he just tried to move, and he just tried to get out. But forward was getting even worse. It was even tighter and lower, and the ceiling seemed to dip down, and the ground seemed to rise up. Or maybe he was just imagining it. In fact, he was not imagining it. He felt it on his back, on his chest, and his ribs, the intense pressure. His breath came in short bursts now, sharp and incomplete. He tried to scream again, but it came out as a thin, weak scream, almost as if the space was swallowing his scream. And then he heard something. It wasn't behind him, it was ahead of him. Something was deeper within the crawl space, just waiting. The beam of his flashlight trembled as he pointed it forward. It barely reached anything but dirt and more wood and concrete, or dark, narrow space. But the sound came again, and this time it was even closer. He actually stopped breathing for a moment so that he could carefully listen. And then he understood something worse than being stuck. He wasn't alone down there. He tried to move again. He was desperate now, blind and frantic, trying to move forward and trying to move backward. The ceiling pressed lower. The ground rose higher. Or maybe the space itself was folding inward. At this point, his chest was so compressed that he couldn't fill his lungs. He gasped. There was not enough air. He reached back blindly, toward the light, toward the opening. His fingers brushed the air, but it was just too far. It had moved again. Or he had, or the space had. He didn't know. But the opening was no longer within reach. And the thing ahead, it moved again. This time closer. And then he heard breathing, and it wasn't his own breath. It was something else ahead of him, in that same tight air. He tried to scream, but this time, nothing came out. There was no longer enough air to scream. His chest spasmed. His vision narrowed. And then the flashlight slipped from his hand. The shadows twisted, and the space looked impossibly small now. It was crushing him. It was closing in on him. And then he saw it, not clearly, not fully, but just enough. He saw something pressed flat against the dirt, and it was moving without space to move. And it was crawling where crawling shouldn't be possible. And it was coming toward him. And in that final moment, he understood. It wasn't just the space. It was making the space smaller. Hit that like button and subscribe to support this channel so we can bring you more phobia and horror-related content. And check out these next videos.